Welcome to Talking Absolute Worship for Epiphany 6. Epiphany goes on and on. There are 2 more Sundays of Epiphany, but this one is Epiphany 6, where we'll be looking at Jeremiah, Psalm 1, 1 Corinthians, and Luke chapter 6. And I have with me 3 exciting, intelligent, wonderful, and inspiring preachers of the word and ministers of word and sacrament to share with us their thoughts of how to help people in worship for Epiphany 6. So Rachel, where did you go first with these readings?
Well, I noticed that several of the readings for this week contain a blessing. So I thought I would explore the idea of blessing and perhaps its link with happiness. And I think maybe a kind of broad summary would be that blessed are those who live in dependence of God rather than in dependence on self. I think that's the kind of feeling that's coming through. And in the Bible, the kind of definition of happiness or of being blessed is definitely God-centered rather than self-centered. And to be happy is to trust your life to God, to conform to God's values of love and justice and peace, and to depend on God, I think, as being sufficient for facing the worst in life. So I thought I'd explore it. I could explore it through 3 out of 4 readings, but that's probably a bit too much. But I would initially start with Jeremiah, I think. And I like the idea that that happiness is bound to the commitments of our hearts, and that God sees what is in our hearts and understands us. And that we might feel seduced by the idea of self-sufficiency, but if we are, then we're like plants sort of struggling for life in the desert, and that blessing comes through trust in the Lord. I think one of the problems we've got with that is that it doesn't always look like that. So often people appear to be happy and blessed, and they don't look like they're, and they might be very, very well dependent on themselves, and they don't appear to be like poor, struggling, straggly bushes in need of water. So that's I think one of the difficulties that following this line of blessing is going to involve, because it doesn't always look doesn't always look quite right, perhaps. And I think you get a bit of that from Luke as well. Jesus is talking to people who've already committed to follow Jesus. Otherwise, what Luke says could be seen as a bit of a bribe, because we've got, blessed are you if this, this, and this, but woe to you if this, this, and this. So it could almost be seen as, right, respond to this message or otherwise. But Jesus is talking to people who've already made that commitment to follow. And I do wish we could read on a bit further, because then you get to the bit about God being kind to the ungrateful and the wicked as well as to the good, and it's much more comfortable, because I do think that it can be very problematic. So there's the problem of appearances, as I've said. Sometimes those who are quite self-sufficient appear to be doing really well, but the other problem is, and I think we see it in Luke, we could be seen to be encouraging people to put up with things that they shouldn't have to put up with, in the hope of, something in the future, you'll have this blessing. And I think you do get that from Luke, because you've got this, well, you're poor now, but in the future you'll receive this, and you're hungry now, but in the future, and it's really not a comfortable thing to explore at all. So my initial, let's have a lovely talk about blessing, actually soon went into difficult areas, and I'm not entirely sure how I would tackle them. I know that when I am happy personally, I interpret it as blessing. There's a challenge to find that sense of blessing in the things that don't make me happy. And I'm always reminded that God invites us to be part of a chain of blessing. And I've said it in other sessions. Blessing's not ever given to us for us to keep to ourselves, but it's always given in order that we can be a blessing to others. And on a previous session, we were talking about trees, so the tree leapt out at me from Jeremiah, the tree planted by water, and I thought trees are at their very essence blessings for the wider world. They bless us with shade and fruit, and they bless the birds with places to nest. And I know you don't get that from the Jeremiah reading, but I just think that actually our flourishing can only ever be for us to enable the flourishing of others. So the challenge from Luke is to think about how we can then be a blessing to the hungry, to the poor, and not just to say, oh, blessed are you because sometime something good will come, but actually how can we be part of that blessing to those who have less than we do? How can we be part of a blessing to those who are oppressed or excluded or whatever? How can we actively take our part in the chain of blessing?
Thank you. Yes, and yes, I remember some of the stuff we said about trees, and I think I find that metaphor of Jeremiah very powerful, of talking about trees, and I'm a bit baffled by in the year of drought it is not anxious. I'm not sure that trees experience anxiety in quite that way, but I guess he's just playing with the metaphor of if you've got those deep roots, then you're trusting in God. So it is a metaphor of people. But I agree with you, Rachel, about this. It's easy to look at the Luke and the Beatitudes and say, so if you're poor, you will be blessed, and if you're rich, or you might seem happy now, but you're not really happy because there'll be sort of judgment. And there's something about it. I'm not entirely comfortable either, so I don't quite know how we unpack that sense of what it means to be happy and blessed. And yet I agree with you that we don't always feel that it's easy when life is good to say, and so God is with us, but we know that God is with us when life does not feel good, and it's how we express that reality that and maybe that's what Jesus is getting at, that reality is more than just the now. So however you feel now, the reality of God's blessing of you goes beyond the now. But that can sound like oh, you're poor. Well, that's good, isn't it? Because that means God's blessing you in the future. So that's sort of we believe in life before death, the Christian aid thing, not just to promise people something better for the future. And I'm not seeing anyone else wanting to jump in on that one. I think we're all chewing over that and what that might mean. So Robert, we'll go to you next and see, what did you battle with?
The idea of the tree and rootedness came to me, and I looked up the Jeremiah reading in the Message, and the rootless tree is like tumbleweed on the prairie, out of touch with the good earth. And I thought that was really lovely, just sort of drifting along, rootless and not held down. I do think as well, trees do suffer from, well, they might not suffer from anxiety, but they do get stressed, don't they, when the weather's not good for them. And then the thing about being a blessing, it's just, this has only just come to me, but what Rachel was saying, I was thinking, well, a tree isn't just sort of independent and standing there, is it? It has a huge effect on the area around it. There's all the stuff about carbon, trees taking in carbon, so they are a blessing to their environment if they are healthy. So I wonder if there might be something for us in that. I think I read somewhere about the danger in this sort of contrast thing in these readings, that you could become it could become if you have faith, then everything's going to be fine, which obviously is a very risky way to go. But then also there is the bit of me, where did I find it? The heart is deceitful. Where's that one? I can't.
That's in Jeremiah.
Yeah. I'm still looking at the Message. That's why.
Yeah, the heart is.
And I thought about what did it mean by the
Verse
heart,
9.
and that thing that Rachel was talking about earlier on, about that you try to go the right way, but it's not always easy to do that. And I wondered if that is your heart in a negative sense. Your inner core drags you in the wrong direction, and if you're not rooted, then it's much harder to hold to the right way. But then there's this bit, and that I often think about, that there are this desire to look after ourselves, and to the danger is that we don't step out in faith. We never take a risk because we're always so careful to look after ourselves, to be sure that our comfort is safe. And I always think of, and as I say, I'm a bit nervous about mentioning this because it does fit in with this idea, if you do what you think God wants, then everything's going to be okay. But there are just one or two times in my life when I know I've stepped out in faith and taken a huge risk. And the one was when I decided to candidate for the ministry. And really, that's the first time in my life that then everything just seemed to fall into place. You know, I didn't know we were going to have enough money, and then this job appeared, all stuff like that happened. And I think sometimes we avoid God's blessings for us by trying to make sure that we care for our own material needs. Am I making any sense? Yeah. And is that the heart saying, no, careful, don't take that risk? So there was that. And this contrast, there's a contrast in Corinthians that I read somewhere. There's an if then else. If there is no resurrection of the dead, then Christ has not been raised. If Christ has not been raised, then, and that took me back to computer programming, about the if then thing, you know. So but then it's dangerous because it takes you back to a contrast. So I'm rambling, but I always find it much easier to talk about faith when I'm feeling down. I think when everything's going fine, I just tend to forget, you know, and think, oh, you know, everything's all right. But then on the dark night of the soul, when I'm feeling miserable and everything is going wrong, then I'm very aware of God's presence, and I'm desperate to feel God's presence to reach out my hand. And I think at those times I'm possibly more open to talking about it because I can't see anywhere else to turn. And so I think that's, rather than it being everything's brilliant if you follow God, it's more like if you've experienced life without faith, then that's why faith makes sense, because it's impossible really to understand how bleak life can be if you haven't lived life without faith. I think I'll stop now.
No, I actually, that last bit you said about, you know, experiencing faith more in the downs than the ups, I then look back at what Jesus says: woe to you who are rich, you've received your consolation. Woe to you who are full now, you will be hungry. I think I'd always kind of felt that was almost like a judgment thing, but maybe it was Jesus saying exactly what you just said. There will be up times, but there will be down times. And those downtimes will come, whoever you are, because however rich you are, you can't completely insulate yourself against everything that's going to happen. And, you know, we all reach the end of our lives. We all get sick. We all, you know, all sorts of things happen. And maybe Jesus is saying that, if you're buoyant and life's going well and you think you don't need faith, woe to you, because when the bad times come, you're not going to have something there kind of to fall back on. Back to you, Robert.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this whole thing that material wealth is a blessing, once you've got enough, it doesn't matter how much more you've got. I don't know. I watched the film Crazy Rich Asians over Christmas, and it's all about these people who've got more wealth than we can ever begin to imagine, and they're all miserable. And you sort of think, and yeah, sadly, that is one of the lessons life teaches you. If you're not miserable now, then you probably are going to be. And that's why without faith, it's just bleak.
Mm-hmm.
Faith is the thing that roots you and gives you hope that, yes, there are going to be bleak times, but then afterwards there are going to be better times. And faith teaches you that it isn't about your material wealth. Obviously you need enough, but once you've got enough, I remember listening to Polly Toynbee talking about these people like Jeff Bezos, and they've got more money than they are ever going to be able to spend. If they spent £1 million a day, they wouldn't be. And you think it's just this whole idea that the more you get, the happier you are, which is our culture teaches us, is meaningless, really. Sorry, I'm giving you a sermon then.
You're talking absolute worship. Thank you for that. Catherine, where did you go with these readings?
Well, similarly, I looked at the contrast between the tree planted in the desert, a dry shrub, compared to a tree planted by a stream, and that was in the Jeremiah 17, 5-10. But also it is similar to the blessings and woes in Luke chapter 6, and Psalm 1 too. I liked what you said, Robert, in Epiphany 5, that people looking in the wrong places for contentment and for meaning and purpose in life. If we are looking for wealth and riches and think that notion that somehow that's where a lot of people focus their energies, to make a living, to have a nice home, to have what they would like, to be able to do what they would like, but they are not sourcing the source of life and love, which is God. And I've got here a tree planted in the desert. It doesn't bear fruit, and it's not linked to a permanent source of nourishment. And also something you mentioned too, Robert, is that it has no companionship. Whereas a tree planted by a stream sinks its roots deeply down, and it's richly fertile. It's productive, and it can cope with the heat. And it's always fresh, even in dry, hot times. So when there are difficulties in life, the nourishment, the source of life, if the source of life is God, without God, we're not linked to what we really need for meaning, purpose, and fullness in life. And it made me think of John chapter 4, where Jesus said, "I am the water of life." So it's God is the source of life, and it's not only desirable, it's necessary to the thirsty, but it also that it's a gift that God gives. And so it's for us to respond to the gift by it speaks of our where is our heart? Well, that's our innermost being, our will, our intentions, our disposition, sort of where our heart is. I guess idolatry versus worshiping God. There will be all that we have. And yes, I don't think wealth is sufficiently adequate to give meaning, purpose, and fullness of life, although it does make life more comfortable. So it's not entirely a lie. And on Luke's Sermon on the Plain, rather than the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, it does have these 4 statements of warning, but they're not of blessing matched with 4 statements of warning. And it follows on from Luke 4, that Jesus's manifesto, that he came to heal the sick and feed the hungry and help the poor, rather than only for the rich and wealthy. It's not magical words that will change a life, or commands or demands. It's observing life, I think, and how different things are if you are linked to God. But it also gives hope, I think, a reversal of fortunes that God will bring. It sort of reminds me too of Mary's song of praise. You know, the rich will be brought low, and the powerful and the lowly will be exalted. So Jesus is overturning the assumption in their society, also in our society, that prosperity is a sign of God's blessing. But the reality is we also shouldn't find our faith struggling when bad things happen. In fact, it is when we are in tough times that our faith is tested, and that we then are more likely to be reliant and dependent on God. And I think it's a challenge to those of us who are wealthy and privileged and powerful. We think we aren't. The problem is, I think in our society, we don't consider ourselves rich. We think we're just sort of in the middle somewhere. But actually we are, in comparison to the vast rest of the world. And it means that if we are linked to the source of life, then we also are linked to Jesus's manifesto, or his commission to us is to make sure that we are also serving the poor, the marginalized, the weak in society, the outsiders, and to support and help them, to be a blessing to them. So I guess it's also, to me, a challenge, because we are blessed as we bless others. So those were my thoughts.
Thank you. Rachel?
Catherine sent me on a little bit of a tangent for a minute when you talked about receiving things as a gift, because it just sent me off on a whole kind of gift journey. And with gifts, with proper gifts, you never deserve them, do you? You know, you can't say, oh well, I earned this gift. They're always given, but there's as much in the receiving as in the giving. So a gift could be left wrapped up under the Christmas tree for 12 months. But if you don't receive it, if the person it's intended for doesn't receive it and open it and do something with it, then you kind of, maybe it's a bit like Schrodinger's cat, is there anything in the box? So you have to kind of receive it. And I think, and if you receive a really good gift, then you automatically, I think, want to share it. If you receive a really brilliant book, you want to you tell your friends about this amazing book that you've read, or if you've received this brilliant labor-saving gadget, then you're telling people about it. And I feel that I just went off into a whole realm of this circling around the idea of a gift, but most of all that how does it change the way we go about our living if we acknowledge every moment as a gift? Sorry, I went off on one.
No.
Fantastic. Robert, where did you go?
Oh, well, this is Catherine, and then Rachel sent me off. It's just the whole idea that a gift is something you don't deserve. Takes us into, for me, what is such hugely countercultural stuff, because everything in our society is transactional. So the idea that you're given something and you don't have to give something back, and you're given something that I get uncomfortable in church when we have rounds of applause for a particular person who's got into Oxford or something, because it seems to be, I always think about all the other ones who didn't, that sort of stuff. And it reminds me of a sketch in Monty Python years ago. I wasn't a particular fan of Monty Python, but I do remember this, where they go into the bank manager and ask him to give some money to charity. And the whole joke is the fact that this bank manager cannot understand the concept of giving and not getting anything back. And I thought that sort of is an illustration of our society. And it just made me realise, or made me think, how difficult our job is, because we're talking about God's gift of God's self to us, and really asking nothing in return, and the return is the response, isn't it? But it's so, you think, no wonder we have a difficult job, because everything else is saying you earned it, you deserve it, this sort of stuff.
Yep, thank you. And I think that countercultural thing extends to the 1 Corinthians reading about, if Christ was not raised, our faith was in vain. But Christ was raised, and therefore we can have faith. Because again, it's like, we've all been saying about trying to square the circle of when you're happy and blessed and when you're not, and kind of, recognizing that your faith helps you through the ups and downs. But what the 1 Corinthians reading says is that at the absolute worst down you can think of, when Christ was dead, even so, God hadn't finished in that situation, and God the Father raised him from dead, so that there isn't the ultimate catastrophe. And again, I think for a lot of people in our culture, the idea that at the end it will all end in nothing, I think is in a lot of people's psyche. The way in which we avoid the word dead a lot. I was, because turn of the year, and those who passed away in 2021, those who are no longer with us, all the different euphemisms. And I think it's really important sometimes to say that we all die. But what 1 Corinthians says is, we die, but we don't die. We die, but we're never lost in God. God will raise us as God raised Christ. And maybe there's something about that then shoots through the idea of what does it mean to be blessed, and what does it mean to be cursed, or what does it mean to say woe, what does it mean to be rich, what does it mean to be poor, which doesn't let us off the hook of, we're kind of in the middle, I think you said, Catherine, which we're not, of course. We're way up the top of the scale globally. So we can't lose our sense of responsibility to those who are poor. But we also need to recognise that in the end, God will lift everybody up, and that will not be about how blessed we've been or how rich we've been. Our responsibility then is, what do we do with what we've got now? And I think you were saying, Robert, about trees, the roots of trees and being by the water. And I'm reminded of the wood wide web, as they're calling it now, the way in which the roots of trees, not only do the roots themselves grow in between, but different fungi link up trees, so that there's, in a wood, all of the trees are connected and are able to share nutrients and share water and share all sorts of things with each other to keep the whole wood healthy. And you kind of think there's something there, a kind of a parable of that's the way we're meant to live. Not to say, well, goody, I've got all the resources I need, but to say, I've got these resources now. How do I share those resources for the good of the whole world? And certainly with, I'm thinking of the climate emergency. I was reading something just this morning about the carbon debt we each rack up every day, compared to in other countries where it might take them all year to release the amount of carbon dioxide we release in a day or two. And you realise the huge inequality. What is our response to that? How do we cope with sharing resources, and how do we just be less greedy? Sorry, Robert, you were going to come in and stop me.
Well, it was just you talking about the forest and the intermingling, and how when we think it's the end, then God says, no, it isn't, there's more. Made me think how messy God is, and how, again, it's this contrast. We think of it beginning, middle, end. You're born, you live, you die, sorted, all nice and straight. And then God, no. And in a sort of way, perhaps that's a growing realization, the forest thing, that we aren't this independent, autonomous unit, each of us. All of the time we are affecting those around us, affecting the planet. And I suppose perhaps what we could think about is in what ways can we then be a blessing rather than a curse in our existence.
Thank you. Yep. Are we done with the readings, friends? Is there anything else, any other rabbit holes or root bowls or anything else we want to go down? We remember that worship is not just about opening the word, but about other forms of activity and other forms of thought and encounter too. So what else have we got that we might use in helping people to encounter God in our worship on Epiphany 6? Rachel, what have you got?
I thought I would give people time to acknowledge their blessings, and maybe share with one another, so what some of those things might be, talk about those things, but not just to sort of say, oh, well, I've been blessed with, I don't know, whatever it might be, but think about actually how can we be part of sharing our blessings? So maybe encourage people to talk about particular needs that we can perceive in the community around us or in the wider world. How can we be part of that thing? Sorry, it just popped into my mind. The idea when my kids were younger, and it was always this, you will eat what's in front of you, because there are people on the other side of the world who don't have food 3 times a day, and I remember being told, well, you can send this over to them, kind of thing. But how can we be part of passing on and sharing the blessings? And I also thought I would have maybe a sort of slightly lengthened time of confession, with a focus on those times when we want to keep our blessings to ourselves. Where have we withheld blessing from others, perhaps in the same way that sometimes we withhold forgiveness, or we withhold love? I think we withhold blessing too. Where and when have we done that, and sort of acknowledge that before God? That would be a private matter, I think, but yeah, that they were my ideas.
Thank you. Robert, what have you got?
I found an idea for some sort of symbols to use at the front of the church or wherever. It suggests putting them on Hessian cloth draped down, a small jug of oil for healing, a loaf of bread for the hungry and full, a bowl of salty water for the tears, some coins for the poor and the rich. I thought that might be quite nice. And then I looked for pictures. I thought it'd be nice to have a picture, and I found, I don't know if they're allowed to be used, but I'll show them you. This is from the northern wall of the Sistine Chapel, the Sermon on the Plain. So that's a sort of, I've got to share my screen, haven't I?
Yeah, it'd be nice.
Oh, yeah. Which one shall I share now? Don't know, try that one. Are you seeing anything?
Oh yeah, lovely.
Yeah, right. And I thought, yeah, that's all right. That's a sort of conventional. But what I thought about that is it's the Sermon on the Plain, but he's still above him. Yeah, so then I found this one. Can you see that?
Oh yeah.
That's by an artist. I'm going to have to show it. And this by this lady, Anna Archer, Danish artist associated with the Skagen painters, an artist colony on the north. She liked to paint everyday scenes. So that's just a sermon out in the field or on the dunes. And I thought that might be a different way of thinking about the Sermon on the Plain. How do I unshare now? Oh, here we go. Yeah, those two things. A song by John Bell called "Don't Be Afraid," which I thought was rather nice, about the idea of taking risks or stepping out because you are rooted. Oh, that's what it is, isn't it? If you're rooted in your faith, if you're not like a piece of tumbleweed, then you are more able perhaps to step out and to do things and to be a blessing to others, because you're not holding on perhaps in a sense desperately, because you're rooted. That just came to me. There you are.
Thank you. Wonderful. Catherine, what have you got?
I had similar ideas, Robert, to you, of pictures, and I have one picture of a tumbleweed, not of a tumbleweed, I can share my screen, but the other picture I can't find it. But how do I? Okay, share. Can you see it?
Yeah. Oh yeah, nice.
That's a single tree in the desert. And then my other picture, I can't find. I was trying to, I don't know where I saved it. But it is of a tree by river. And it's actually, there are other trees and grass, because it's in a desert, but it's by an oasis, and there's sort of palm trees. But it's like a huge, is it a fig tree or something? But it's enormous, and it's a tree that is in the Middle East that can grow and grow. And it just shows the contrast between being completely dry and not linked to the sea and to the river, to water of life. And if God is the water of life, the Lord is the water of life. And maybe to have people then sort of discuss in twos and threes, what are the resources and the blessings that give their blessings? What are the resources that we have in faith that keep us rooted, that we can have contentment and fulfillment and peace in God, that we, as people of faith. So for them to think about what it means to be abiding in God and being as the source of life and love. So comparing the two pictures, obviously you would have to make sure that they are, I'm stop share, here we go, that the pictures would be copyright free and also free or you have to buy them. So that would be something for a minister to be careful of. But yes, I love having visual things in worship, and just to allow people for a time of reflection and prayer, and then to lead to prayers for others, those who are struggling in the different prayers of intercession. So prayers for those who are lonely, those who are grieving, those who are not well, those who are refugees, those who are finding that they're not blessed, that they too might find God's a source of healing and wholeness. So that's as far as I got.
Thank you. And I love that image of the green bush in the desert as kind of a symbol of what we were saying about, in the bleak times, God is still with us. So, it may look like desert all around us, but the reality is if we're rooted in Christ, then, we are still green somehow. It did all sorts of things, so which shows the power of an image. So, thank you for that. And I had a little think about hymns. And the one we were just talking about, blessings, and it reminded me of the Fred Kahn hymn, Bless and Keep Us, Lord, in Your Faith United, which has got that lovely line in it, blessings shrivel up when your children hoard it, help us, Lord, to share, for we can afford it. And it's the tune goes, bless and keep us, Lord, in your faith united. But I'm reminded that if you ever find a hymn that you don't know the tune and you can't find a tune that people will know, you can always just invite a congregation to read the words and do it as sort of, just read them as words. And sometimes when it's a hymn with really thoughtful words, they come home to you more when you just read it than when you sing it. And if you really want to, you could read them first and then sing them to really get people to enter into it. But I thought that's a lovely hymn about blessing. And the other one that I thought of was there's a version of Psalm 1, which again is in Rejoice and Sing, 669. I wrote that one now. But it's quite an unusual tune because it's a Thai tune originally, and it was actually based on a version of Psalm 1 from Thailand. Eric Routley took it and made it slightly more westernized, but it still has quite an Eastern sound to the music and the intervals. And I can't remember who told me a long time ago that all worship should have at least one hymn from the World Church in, to remind you that you belong to a whole worldwide Christian church. Now, I can't say I always stick to that, but what I do try and do, if I choose a hymn that's from another bit of the world, is to take some time just to tell people that. And then you could even, if you wanted to, when you come to the intercessions, you could pray for Thailand, as this one is Thai, or wherever your hymn has come from. Again, just to remind us that to widen our perspective of, we think this is the church. We might think the building we're sat in on a Sunday morning is the church, or the Zoom screen of people we can see. But there's a whole world out there, and a whole world of people. Who are worshipping God in familiar ways or in less familiar ways, but ways that can enrich us. So I found a version, it's just a small snippet really, on the web of this hymn. The version is, happy are they who walk in God's wise way. And I'll just play a little snippet because it's such an unusual sound to the ear because of this sort of Thai tune. Make sure I've got the sound. Lord, in your mercy, spare me, keep me still. Let me not choose a sinner's way. Promise and know you equally have So it was just a little snippet of it. What struck me, having sung it from the book and from the music, and I've always sung it much more quickly than that. And it's got that and the sort of repeated the drone underneath there going on, and the dung da dung kind of rhythm is very different to our Western ear. But I thought it was beautiful. Actually, really makes you think about the words. So if you had a music group who could do that for you, or you might be able to find a whole version of it somewhere that you could use in recording. As I say, that was just kind of a little snippet. Or be brave and get people to sing it. But just a thought about using some world church music. So that's from Thailand, a Thai hymn originally. So that's kind of what I had. So once again, we've come to the end of our time, and we are ready, or at least we're ready to continue thinking about Epiphany 6. And we want to bless all those who've listened to this recording, all those who are preparing worship wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whichever part of the world you might want to help to encourage and enrich your worship. But we want to bless you, so we want to pray for you, and Catherine's going to do that for us.
Gracious God, we do thank you for your many blessings to us. We thank you that you are the source of life and the source of love. Help us to be rooted in you. We pray your blessing on all who are preparing worship for Epiphany 6, reminded that this is the time of year when we remember how you have revealed yourself to us, and you are the light of the world. And so we pray your blessing on each and every one preparing worship, and for all those whom we serve and those who will experience worship. May we know your presence with us, leading us, holding us, sustaining us, and challenging us, commissioning us to serve you and follow you in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.